This is not a love story. Inhale. This is what happens when a city is rebuilt, to make a woman's body the only liquid asset left. Haussmann demolished about 20,000 working-class homes. Pinkney 1958 counted them. Provincial women funneled into needle trade, 300 francs a year. The math wasn't mathing, so you took the only exit ramp Paris had designed for you. Welcome to the Second Empire's kept women labor regime, the one your textbook called romance. So you took the exit ramp. The first thing Paris does, before anyone touches you, before any contract is whispered, is sort you. The classification is the first violence. Everything else is bookkeeping. There were 3 tiers. Lorette, demi-mondaine, grande horizontale. Rounding 2003 maps it cleanly. Lorette, neighborhood level, 1 patron, rent paid, no carriage. Demi-mondaine, multiple patrons, salon access, the right invitations. Grande horizontale, top of the pyramid. Hotels on the Champs-Élysées, diamonds on loan from the state, almost. Names in the gossip column on purpose. Here is the part your textbook skipped. Yoshiwara, Edo. Taiyu at the top, Tenjin in the middle, Sancha at the base. Seigle 1993 lays out the same architecture, different empire, same logic. A licensed quarter, a tiered roster, a state that calls it tolerated, and a society that calls it disposable. Both can be true. Both usually are. You have just been classified, not by talent, not by beauty. By how many francs the city thinks your body can move per month. The records that survived called it the demi-monde. We are going to call it what the ledger calls it, a tier in a labor regime. Now, about that ledger, you cannot understand why 3 tiers existed in 1860s Paris until you understand what the city had just done to itself. Or rather, what Napoleon III had done to it through 1 prefect with a ruler and a budget. His name was Haussmann. The polite phrase is grands travaux. The honest phrase is a controlled demolition. Between 1853 and 1870, Haussmann's renovation cleared about 20,000 working-class dwellings from central Paris. Pinkney 1958 counted them. The figure is contested at the edges, but the order of magnitude survives every modern audit. Where families had lived above workshops, boulevards opened wide enough for 2 cavalry columns abreast. Officially, light, air, hygiene. Quietly, barricade-proofing after 1848. Concurrently, a real estate sort. Rents in renovated arrondissements tripled. The poor were not invited back. Now, pan out. Berlanstein, 1984, traces the other half of the funnel. Provincial women left Brittany, Auvergne, Lorraine. Textile crisis in the north after 1860. Vineyard collapse in the south. Breath. Younger daughters with no inheritance, and a one-way ticket to the Gare de l'Est. Paris was not just expensive. Paris was the only city with work that paid in cash on Friday. The needle trade, the flower trade, domestic service, and, at the lowest visible rung, the regulated houses. This is where the love story falls apart. Paris wasn't romantic. Paris was an extraction machine. Capital pulled in from the provinces, labor pulled in after it, a body pulled into whatever tier still had an opening. The Second Empire tolerated the regime. The bourgeoisie did not accept it. Tolerance and acceptance are 2 different categories. Breath. Confusing them is how a coercion becomes a costume. So, about the math. About why a needle trade wage made the choice for you before you ever met him. So, the math. Before any patron, any salon, any diamonds, the math had already made the choice. Corbin 1978 was the first historian to put the wage data next to the regulated house data and refused to look away. The book is Les Filles de Noce. The argument is simple. Subsistence was a floor. The floor was lethal. Needle trade, flower trade, lace finishing. A provincial woman in 1860s Paris, 14 hours a day at piecework, 300 to 500 francs a year. Corbin 1978 documents the floor. Scott, 1988, sets it inside the broader gender of labor framework. That is not a wage. That is rent minus food minus winter. Now the other column, a working demi-mondaine, 2,000 to 3,000 francs a month. Griffin 2001 cross-checks roundings numbers. The ratio lands between 50 and 100 times. The math wasn't mathing. Picture the room. Faubourg Saint-Antoine, a garret over a courtyard. One window. One stove that does not work on credit. A bundle of shirts due Saturday. You are 19. The choice that the textbook called scandalous, Peirce had pre-priced it. The exit ramp wasn't a temptation, it was an arithmetic. Cut forward. A sugar baby allowance schedule, 2024. A creator dashboard with 3 tiers and a quiet payout calendar. Bernstein 2007 has a phrase for this. Bounded authenticity. Brents and Sanders 2010 trace the mainstreaming. Different platform, different century. Still the same arithmetic when housing eats 60% of income, and the only liquid asset left is access. Breath continuation, not equivalence. Read the footnote. Back to 1865. Once the math has made the choice, the mechanism takes over. The mechanism has a schedule. The mechanism has a ledger. And the mechanism had a witness, the Préfecture de Police. Once the arithmetic has made the choice, the mechanism takes over. Harsin 1985. Policing prostitution in 19th-century Paris. Read the police files that the Préfecture meant as control, breath. What survived as control became evidence. Fond BB1, Fond BB2, names, addresses, patron rotations. The bureaucracy that wanted these women contained was the bureaucracy that ended up preserving them. The day was scheduled. Mornings, correspondence, modiste fittings, sometimes the bath. Worth's atelier from 2 in the afternoon if you ranked. De Marly 1980 documents the calendar. Afternoons, the carriage drive in the Bois de Boulogne, 3 to 5. Evenings, the opera, the boulevard restaurants, the salon. The night belonged to the patron of record, breath. The next morning belonged to the patron paying the rent. Multi-patron wasn't a love triangle. Multi-patron was portfolio management. One signature financed the hotel. Another signed the carriage. A third covered the jeweler's note. The Préfecture filed every rotation. Flip the frame, breath. You are not the kept. You are the manager of a portfolio you did not ask to underwrite. In a market the Code Napoleon banned you from entering on your own name. Article 217. Article 124. You could not open a bank account without a husband's signature, so the body became the bank. The jewelry became the balance sheet. We are getting to the balance sheet. Quick fact check. If the documentary you watched showed a kept woman drinking champagne at Maxim's, raise an eyebrow. Maxim's opened in 1893. The Second Empire ended in 1870, 23 years apart. Maxim's belongs to the Belle Epoque, not to Cora Pearl's working decade. Whoever told you otherwise, they didn't check. The aesthetic flattens, the decades do not. Back to the ledger. Because once you understand that the jewelry was a balance sheet, and once you understand that the Préfecture was filing it, the next 3 case studies stop being scandal. They start being accounting. Marie Duplessis, La Païva, Cora Pearl. Hedge included. Here is where the frame snaps. Before this sentence, the jewelry is decoration, breath. After this sentence, the jewelry is a balance sheet. Code Napoleon Article 217. A married woman could not contract on her own name. Article 124. Listed alongside minors and the legally incapacitated. Scott 1988 traces the legal architecture. The only liquid asset a woman could carry, sell, pawn, or flee with was on her body. That is not adornment. That is liquidity under coverture. Case 1. Marie Duplessis, Issartel 1981, Les Dames aux Camélias, reconstructs the ledger. 6-room apartment, Boulevard de la Madeleine. A patron in his 80s, Count Stackelberg, dead at 23. Tuberculosis on the certificate, breath. Bailiffs in the foyer before the body cooled. The novel her clients later wrote called it tragic. The estate inventory called it liquidation. Case 2. La Païva. Rounding 2003 documents the inventory. Hotel at 25 Champs-Élysées. Onyx staircase. A diamond Rivière auctioned in 1884. Millions of francs at estate. The receipts dropped. Case 3. Cora Pearl, and Here We Hedge, out loud. Pearl's memoirs were published in 1886, by Pearl herself, and the woman was a self-mythologizer of generational caliber. Richardson 1967 cross-checks where the archive permits. Reportedly, the bathtub of champagne. Reportedly, being served naked on a silver platter. The receipts that survived support the spending pattern, not the spectacle. We pass it on with the hedge attached. That is the difference between history and gossip. Cut forward, briefly. A platform creator dashboard, 2024. Tier metrics. Subscriber retention curve. Quiet payout calendar. Same surveillance, prettier UI. The receipts still drop, just on a different ledger. Continuation, not equivalence. Exhale, the footnote stays. Now back to 1865, because the balance sheet had a public stage, and the stage was the Bois de Boulogne. A balance sheet needs witnesses, otherwise the ledger is just paper. So between 3 and 5 every afternoon, the demi-monde rolled into the Bois de Boulogne in open carriages, dressed in worth, seated where the bourgeoisie could not pretend not to see. De Marly 1980 documents the calendar of display. Richardson, 1967, traces who was watching whom. The carriage parade was not vanity. It was a public solvency check. A new dress meant a new patron. A repeated dress meant a contract under review. A missing afternoon meant the rotation had broken. The bourgeois women in their closed carriages read the open carriage roster like a stock ticker. This is the part that gets cut from the romance. The women everyone called fallen were the women everyone could not stop measuring. That is not a fall. That is a market. Now, leave Paris. Shanghai, the foreign concessions, the 1890s. McMahon 2010, Polygamy and Sublime Passion, documents the key houses inside the British and French concessions along the Bund. Tiered rosters. Public processions through the foreign quarter. Patrons drawn from compradors, foreign officials, and the new Shanghai bourgeoisie. The newspaper Shenbao printed the rotation, a licensed quarter inside an extraterritorial enclave inside a treaty port economy. Different empire, different language, same machine. The carriage parade had a Bund cousin, the Worth dress had a brocade cousin, the receipts kept dropping. In a different ledger, in a different language, under the same logic of bodies as collateral, when capital arrives faster than rights. Quick correction. If the documentary you watched paired Cora Pearl with La Belle Otero in the same scene, they got the decades wrong. Otero was born in 1868. Pearl's working decade was the 1860s. Otero belongs to the Belle Époque cabarets, not to Second Empire Grandes Horizontales. 2 generations. Different regimes of display. Whoever told you otherwise, they didn't check. Back to the archive. Because the same prefecture that filed every Bois de Boulogne rotation kept the dossiers, and what was filed for control was preserved as evidence. The files are still sitting there, they can be read. The Préfecture de Police did not file these women out of historical generosity, it filed them out of suspicion. Every kept woman classified above Lorette tier passed through the registration office. Harsin 1985 spent years inside the Fond BB1 and BB2. What the state meant as control, name, address, age, patron rotation, medical inspection date, survived as the most detailed working-class women's archive 19th-century Paris produced. The bureaucracy that wanted them contained ended up being the bureaucracy that remembered them. Now rebuild the legal frame. Precisely. The Second Empire tolerated the regime. That is a legal category. The bourgeoisie did not accept the regime. That is a social category. Confusing the two is how a coercion turns into a costume. Tolerated meant the police would file you instead of arrest you. Accepted meant the salon door would open instead of the servant's entrance. Most of these women lived inside the first category and were locked out of the second their entire working lives. 2 registers, 1 body. Different ledgers. Brief detour, 15 seconds. Istanbul, the same century. The Ottoman harem maintained registration of Carrier, enslaved palace women. In court ledgers Peirce 1993 has reconstructed. Different empire, different legal regime. Still a state filing women's bodies as a category of property and possibility at once. The Paris archive is not unique. It is part of a wider 19th-century pattern. Empires that wanted these women contained kept the only records that now let us name them. The archive meant to erase them, preserved them. And in that gap between intention and outcome, one name survives that the textbook tried hardest to keep as someone else's muse. Her name was Jeanne Duval. Jeanne Duval. Mulatresse, born in Saint-Domingue, what we now call Haiti, somewhere around 1820. The exact year is contested. Breath. The archive on black women in 19th-century Paris is what Spiller's 1987 calls a layered erasure tax. Racialized, gendered, designed. Baudelaire kept her for roughly 20 years. The Le Fleur du Mal cycle of 1857 reframes her as Venus Noire, his muse, his archetype, his myth. The poems survived. Her name almost did not. Here is the painful precision. The records that survive describe her through him. The Manet portrait, circa 1862, now in Budapest, shows her enthroned in white crinoline, alone, after Baudelaire's syphilis had eroded both their lives. We have her face, we have his poems, we do not have her letters, we do not have her side. That is not a missing chapter. That is a designed silence. Spiller's phrase fits, exactly. The erasure tax is paid in primary sources that go missing first, and the secondary literature that fills the gap with the lover's voice instead. And yet, she survived him. She survived 20 years of being someone else's metaphor. She lived. The pattern is not tragic. The pattern is structural. Exactly the structure we have been describing for 12 minutes. Pop culture turns Jeanne Duval into a sad muse. The receipts turn her into a woman who outlasted the man writing her into immortality on her own back. Named, not romanticized. Pattern, not tragedy. Quick correction, last one. If the documentary you watched showed a Belle Epoque pistol duel between Léon de Pougy and Emilien d'Alençon, staged 1900, often misattributed, that is 40 years downstream of the Second Empire. Different decade, different scandal economy. Whoever stitched it into Jeanne Duval's century, they didn't check. The aesthetic flattens, the decades do not. Which brings us forward. Because the regime that filed Jeanne Duval, and filed every woman after her, did not end in 1870, it changed aesthetic. It kept the math, Missy, and every name after. The regime did not end with the Second Empire. It changed costumes. After 1870, the Belle Epoque arrived. New cabarets, new couture houses, new names on the carriage rosters. The math, the one Corbin 1978 mapped, the one the prefecture filed, kept running underneath, and the bodies it could extract widened. Queer bodies, trans-mask bodies, breath, women who lived openly with women, and still had to pay the rent in the same currency the system accepted. Mathilde de Morny, born 1862, died 1944, known as Missy, lived as a trans-mask figure in Belle Epoque Paris when the vocabulary did not exist yet, and the closest the archive gets is war men's suits. We hedge, because the language they would have chosen for themselves was not yet permitted into the record. Performed at the Moulin Rouge in 1907, alongside Colette in the pantomime Rêve d'Égypte, police shut the show down. The state filed it. The state remembered it. Léon de Pougy, kept woman, courtesan, novelist, published Ideal Sapphique in 1901, primary source, her own name on the cover. Natalie Barney's salon at 20 Rue Jacob kept the receipts of an entire lesbian circle that the textbook called Belle Epoque eccentrics. Receipts say otherwise. Named, hedged, restored. Breath. Now look down at your screen. A tier dashboard, a KYC checkpoint, a retention curve. Same machine, prettier UI. The boulevards changed names. The math didn't. Anywhere a city, or a platform, makes a woman's body the only liquid asset left, you will find this regime, different aesthetic. same arithmetic. So here is the tool. When the next documentary or feed served reel calls it a love story, pause. Ask who paid the rent, ask whose name survived, ask which archive remembered them, and which one let them go. That question, asked out loud, is how the regime gets read instead of romanticized. The names have been spoken, the receipts have dropped. 1 minute left, and one boulevard wide enough to remember on. Paris built boulevards wide enough for troops. They were also wide enough to forget women on. The boulevards changed names. The math didn't set. Anywhere a city, or a platform, makes a woman's body the only liquid asset, you will find this regime, under a different aesthetic. Different decade, different language, same arithmetic. Read the ledger, name the patron. Ask which archive remembered them, and which one let them go. Today, someone listened.